Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your Children and Youth Program Grants Info session for 2025. We're just going to give folks a few minutes to log on here, and then we will get started. Okay. I think our live numbers have stopped climbing, so we will go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to the Children and Youth Program Grants Info session for 2025. Before we do anything else, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. So captions are available on this call. If you would like to turn on captions, you can do so by going to the More button at the top right corner of your Teams screen. It may also look like three dots for you. And then from More, you can go to Language and Speech and then turn on live captions. We also have an ASL interpreter from Echo joining us. You'll see her just below me in the side right bar of your screen. They will be providing live interpretation from English to American Sign Language and not a pre-recorded edited translation. My name is Aaliyah. I am the Children and Youth Senior Program Officer here at the Winnipeg Foundation. I am also joined by my colleagues Neneth Banyas, our Manager of Grants, as well as Roxanne Tacky, Senior Learning and Community Engagement Advisor, and fellow Program Officer Anna Maria Posey. So you may see their faces or hear their voices throughout the presentation. I'd also like to acknowledge that while we aren't gathered together in person today, we are still gathered on Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. And so as we proceed through this call and as you go throughout your day, I invite you to reflect on the land that supports your participation in this online space. Lastly, we are using Teams today. I'm assuming by now most of us are familiar with Teams, but I'll take a moment to go through how Teams works for this particular call. We are using chat to participate in the info session, so you will be muted throughout the call, but if you have any questions, you can use the chat function. Again, that's in your top right-hand bar of Teams, the little chat bubble. We have gotten feedback in the past that chat can be quite distracting for folks, especially folks with visual impairments or folks who are neurodiverse. And so I do ask that you keep the chat to a minimum and only use it to ask questions. So by all means, if you have questions throughout the presentation, pop them in that chat and we will do a little bit of a Q&A at the end of the call. If you do find that the chat notifications are distracting, you can turn them off. Again, if you go to More in the top right bar and then navigate to Settings and then Do Not Show Chat Bubbles, you can turn off the chat notifications that way. We also have a notes function on the call. I only mention it to ask that you do not use it. The notes function is public, and therefore any notes that you put in there will be shared with the class. So if you would like to take notes, by all means, go ahead and do so. Just take them offline or on a Word document, not in the call. That said, this call is being recorded, so you don't have to worry about taking down too many notes as it will be published later on our website, and you will also have the opportunity to share it with your colleagues through the recording. Over the next hour, we'll go over a brief introduction to the Winnipeg Foundation and our current goals and priorities, and then we'll jump into all things Children and Youth Program grants, including policies, eligibility criteria, and general criteria for the program. So the who can apply and what can you apply for logistics. And then we'll go over how to apply, including a walkthrough of the application, and then wrapping up with that general Q&A. I'll pass it over now to Neneth to give you a little bit more information about the Winnipeg Foundation.
Thank you, Aaliyah. So I'll kick us off with just a brief introduction about the Winnipeg Foundation. As you may know, for many, many years, our vision as an organization is a Winnipeg where community life flourishes for all. What's new in our organization is our mission. So after we launched our new strategic plan in 2023, our staff and board went through an exercise to review our mission and our values. So our new mission as an organization is to inspire generosity and engagement to foster transformational change for the well-being of our community forever. We are proud to share our updated core values as an organization. One of them is trust. So we ensure transparency, integrity in our work, and respect for all people and the earth in our actions. Second is generosity. We approach community and one another with love, empathy, and possibility. Third is equity. We identify, acknowledge, and help remove systemic barriers so everyone in our community can thrive. The next one is transformation, and we achieve greater outcomes by coming together with curiosity and creativity. Last is responsiveness. We listen and commit to community priorities now and for all future generations. So all of our values and this new mission statement can be viewed on our website. Next, I wanted to briefly share our new strategic plan, which we launched about 2 years ago. So I'll discuss two areas of that plan that relates to our granting process and grant making. One is under the community impact pillar, where we identified 3 strategies. One is to increase equity in the philanthropic sector for communities that have not benefited equitably from grants and gifts. The second strategy under that pillar is to increase support to address 6 priority areas in our vital signs report in 2022. And that's a little bit like a needs assessment that we conduct prior to launching our strategic plan. Those 6 areas are addiction, sense of belonging, hunger, mental health, experiences of homelessness, and last is confidence in institution. The last strategy under that pillar is to increase support beyond grant dollars to the nonprofit sector. The other pillar that I want to share is our community champion pillar. We have also identified a couple of strategies. The first is to improve the well-being of people living in a specific area of the city, which we are referring to the community area for revitalization and equity, or as we know it, CARE. So this is in and around the community of Thunderbird House on Main Street. The second area is supporting children and youth and families engage in the Manitoba's child welfare system, where we are focused on supporting families to reduce the number of children going into child welfare system and supporting better outcomes for youth aging out of the system. The third is to increase the health of the charitable sector. Next, we want to share that for our strategic plan, we have foundational lenses, and these are the underpinning of our plan. We are committed in fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion within our organization and decision-making process. In addition, we are eager to learn from our community partners like yourself about how you are creating and evolving your own DEI practice, so we can work together in building a more inclusive and equitable future for all. We are also one of the other foundational lens for our strategic plan is truth and reconciliation. We recognize this as a complementary but also distinct lens in our plan. Finally, climate change is one of the most important issue of our time, and the foundation recognizes its connection to other important issues such as poverty alleviation, health equity, human rights, and community well-being. How we will move forward on these critical issues will provide key lenses through which we will view all of our work. So because of our foundational lenses, like DEI and truth and reconciliation, you might have noticed that on many of our granting application, we began to ask organizations to share your approach in diversity, equity, and inclusion. For children and youth grants in the application, there's a question on inclusion and sense of belonging. So in part, another aspect that is important for us is an area around the human rights, adhering to the human rights code. So I want to highlight that one of our overarching policy to all of our granting programs that we have for many, many years is the adherence to the Human Rights Code. So I just wanted to share what our statement around that. The Winnipeg Foundation makes granting decisions based on applications merit and does not discriminate on the basis of actual or perceived group characteristic as identified in the Manitoba Human Rights Code. Organizations applying for a grant at the Winnipeg Foundation must also adhere to the Human Rights Code. So going back, oh, sorry, Aaliyah, go back. Sorry. So going back to our, discussion about equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, since we're asking all of our community partners on how you are practicing these areas in your organization, in the spirit of reciprocity, I want to share what we have been doing as an organization. So diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging has been important to us for many decades. We renewed this commitment by conducting our formal diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging audit in 2022 and 23. This include a survey of staff, senior management and board and public committees to gather and analyze some data demographics about the foundation and our individual perspective on DEI and belonging at the foundation. We also review our operational and governance policy with the diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging lens. We're also reviewing our donor engagement, fundraising endowments, gifts, and grant making with these lens as well. Last, we are reviewing our communications, communication platforms, again, once again, with the DEI and belonging lens. Based on the audit, and an action plan was created with objectives, actions, and measures to guide us as we make meaningful changes within the foundation. And during the past 2 years, the foundation has completed some of these actions while others are still in progress or ongoing. In addition, a staff committee was established to ensure progress is being made in the action plan, as well as to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging here at the foundation. So that's a quick overview about the foundation. I'm going to pass the session along to Aaliyah, who's going to dive in more into the Children and Youth Program grants.
Thank you, Naneth. Yes, so back to Children and Youth Program grants, a overview of the program, eligibility, criteria, how to apply, coming up next. In a nutshell, Children and Youth Program grants awards grants of up to $25,000 to youth-serving organizations or established youth programs that serve children and youth facing systemic barriers to participation, including BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ+ youth, youth from economically disadvantaged communities, and youth with disabilities or chronic illnesses. As far as program descriptions go, this one is quite the mouthful. And so I would like to take a minute to break down what this program description means and highlight the key aspects. When we say that this program supports applications of up to $25,000, we mean that that is the maximum grant request you can make. You can certainly request less than $25,000, or you might request the full $25,000 and receive less than that. Because it's a competitive program and because we always receive more applications than we're able to support, partial support, receiving less than you've requested, is always a possibility. When we say youth-serving organizations are eligible to apply, we mean those organizations whose mandate or core mission is to serve youth. You may still be eligible if you are not a youth-serving organization, but you have what we're calling an established youth program. So let's say that your organization doesn't serve exclusively children and youth. You serve a broader community, but you have a program that's been running for at least a year and is therefore established and is a youth serving program serving exclusively youth. You can absolutely apply to children and youth program grants for costs associated with that program. I'm going to say children and youth probably 1,000 times in this presentation. And when I say that, our definition is quite broad. So children and youth in this case are from newborns all the way up to folks who are 30 years old. Likewise, our definition of systemic barriers to participation, which you'll also hear me say again and again, is quite broad. So in our program definition, we have youth-facing systemic barriers to participation may include BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ+ youth, youth from economically disadvantaged communities, and youth with disabilities or chronic illnesses. This is by no means a complete list. What we're trying to get at is that children and youth program grants serves youth who may face barriers to traditional youth programming or who may often be left out of traditional youth programming. And so if you serve youth that are from a community or who are facing barriers that aren't included in that list, you're still eligible to apply. You'll just, in your application, have to be clear about what barriers they are facing and how your program addresses those barriers. You can find full assessment criteria and policies on our website following the link on your screen here. However, this is the info session, so I will take a moment to go through those line by line now. To be eligible for a children and youth program grant, you must be a registered charity or other qualified donee. An other qualified donee doesn't mean nonprofits broadly. It's actually quite a specific list that's created by the CRA and includes organizations like registered amateur athletic associations and National Arts Service organizations. And so the vast majority of applicants who are eligible for a grant through this stream will be a registered charity and have a registered charity number with the CRA. To be eligible, your project must also primarily benefit the people of Winnipeg. And so the easiest way to think of this is where are the majority of your participants from? If the majority of your participants are from Winnipeg, then you're good to go. Your project in this case would be eligible. even if, say, your actual organization is located outside of Winnipeg. We're really focusing on participant demographics in this eligibility line. Next, you are eligible for one children and youth program grant per calendar year. And there's a few bullet points below this to help clarify that. So yes, you are eligible for one children and youth program grant per year, and this does not affect your eligibility for our community grant program. You can still hold a community grant and a children and youth program grant in the same year. We just ask that they're for different projects. So the Winnipeg Foundation essentially can't pay for the same thing twice. So if you're applying to both granting streams, just make sure that you're applying for different projects with different expenses. Unlike community grants, you cannot hold a children and youth grant and a multi-year grant at the same time. And so if you applied for multi-year in late 2024, you have not heard back yet on the outcome of your application, and you actually will not likely hear back on the outcome of your application until Children and Youth Program grants has already closed, right? So it kind of puts you in a bind, knowing whether or not you are eligible to have a Children and Youth Program grant. What we're advising is to apply for the Children and Youth Program grant anyways. And the worst case scenario is for you, actually, likely the best case scenario, which is your multi-year grant is successful. Perfect. You are unfortunately no longer eligible for a Children and Youth Program grant, in which case we'll simply withdraw your application. If your multi-year grant, on the other hand, is not successful this year, then you have already applied to Children and Youth Program grants, and we will review that application as usual. And then lastly, in this subset, grant history is always a factor in review. And so when I said earlier that we would withdraw your children and youth grant application if your multi-year grant application was successful, that doesn't have any impact on grant review. That doesn't negatively impact your future applications. That's simply an administrative process on our end. When I say that we're reviewing your grant history, I really do mean that we're just taking a look at your history, taking a look at any previous final reports, and integrating that information into our review. There's no clear pro or con to this process. Speaking of final reports, a final report is required before you are eligible to apply to Children and Youth Program grants in 2025. So if you received a Children and Youth Program grant in 2024, that project must be completed and reported on before you apply again this year. And I'll show you later when we do the walkthrough of the current application where you can find the final report for the previous year's application if this is applicable to you. It is also important to note here that I am just talking about children and youth program grants. If you have an outstanding community grant or other grant with us, that's okay. That can still be ongoing. It's really just the Children and Youth Program grant from 2024 that you would need to wrap and report on to be eligible. And then lastly, we've already chatted about this, but remember that to be eligible to apply, your project must serve children and youth facing systemic barriers to participation. Eligible costs under this program are quite varied, so we'll go through a few now. Food, supplies, and equipment are all eligible costs, as are fee subsidies, field trips and transportation, facilitators and honorariums, food handler and first aid training, and staff. And so these are all eligible costs as they pertain to the project that you're applying for, not your just broad operational costs. And there are a few invisible asterisks here that might apply to your specific organization. The main one being that if you're an organization like a daycare or a public health facility where your staffing or licensing requirements are the primary responsibility of the government, staff and food handler and first aid training would not be an eligible cost for you, as those aren't the role of philanthropy in that particular case. So I do recognize that there are some nuances here, and we will have an opportunity to either chat one-on-one or in a pre-consult, as I'll mention later, to sort of get into those gray areas if you're unsure if a cost is in fact an eligible cost. We also used to ask organizations to limit their application to one activity per application. We recognize that there's a lot of restraints and some mental math and gymnastics almost to that process. And so this year, that is no longer a requirement. You may apply for multiple activities in one application. Just to again keep in mind that you're limited to one application per calendar year. If your application is successful, you won't be able to reapply until that application is successfully reported on. So that might help you decide what kind of timeline and scopes you're looking at for this application. And then lastly, you might still receive partial support, and that partial support might be enough only to cover one activity in your application. So just a few additional considerations there. Because the Winnipeg Foundation consistently receives more requests for funding than we are able to support, and because there are trust conditions associated with the donor funds that fund this program, there are a few ineligible costs. The first being that we cannot support family programs through children and youth program grants. So it's in the name, it's children and youth program grants. This granting stream is really meant to specifically support children and youth. And so the easiest way to figure out if your project is a good fit is to ask yourself who is the main participant or the primary beneficiary who primarily benefits from my program. If you can easily and clearly say it's children and youth, then it is likely a fit for the program. If you have to kind of think about it and go, well, it serves this neighborhood, but the neighborhood has a lot of children and youth in it, or, well, it's a family program and we're really trying to develop a curriculum that supports the family unit as a whole, but children and youth are involved. If you have to kind of do that work to make it fit, it's unlikely to be a fit for the program. We're really looking at children and youth support specifically. We are also unfortunately unable to support applications from individual schools. So if you are from a school division looking to support a division-wide program, that is still an eligible project. If you are looking to support a project that only supports your school's community as one singular school, then unfortunately it is not a fit for this program. We also don't support capital or renovation costs under children and youth program grants. So large equipment purchases or renovations would be ineligible costs as we're really looking at supporting programming. And then lastly, we are unable to support costs incurred before the date of decision. So if you apply to children and youth program grants, you will get a decision on whether or not your application has been successful in early May. And at that point, if your application is successful, you can start incurring costs that you can use the grant towards, but no retroactive funding. I will say, with the exception of retroactive funding, family programs, individual schools, and capital or renovation costs are all eligible under our community grants application. So that just might be a better fit for you rather than children and youth. The application opens tomorrow, January 15th. Very exciting. There will be a couple ways you can access the application. So you can use that first link there to take you to the Children and Youth Program Grants page on our website, and then use the Apply Now button. You can also use the second link to head straight to our application portal, also known as Smart Simple, and apply directly on the Smart Simple homepage. If you are new to Smart Simple, you will have to register before you're able to access the application, and there's a couple ways you can do that. So if your organization has never applied through Smart Simple for a grant at the Winnipeg Foundation, then you will have to register as a new organization using the Canadian charity with a CRA business number option. If your organization has applied through Smart Simple before, but you as an individual staff person or volunteer doesn't have a login yet for the portal, you yourself have never personally used it, then you'll just have to register as a new contact using the contact of an existing organization registration button. Once you're on Smart Simple, your homepage will look something like this. And I ask that you please, before you do anything else, go to that first orange circle where it says Organization Profile. Organization Profile hosts general information about your organization, including your mission and primary contact information. If you have not updated your organization profile within the last year and clicked that little recertify organization button on that page, Smart Simple will actually prevent you from being able to submit your application at the very last step. And so every year we have folks that are hitting submit that 1 minute before the deadline. They think they're good to go. They've just got it in. And then they get an error pop up that they haven't recertified their organization and they miss the deadline. So please, before you do anything else, play it safe, go to organization profile, update it, and hit recertify to make sure that you are good to go. Once you've done that, you can find the Children and Youth Program Grants application under that second orange circle where it says Open Funding Opportunities. And then once you've started your application and you've saved it in progress, you want to return to it at a later point. Instead of going back to that open funding opportunities where it would start a new application, you can access your in progress application through the in progress tab at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there where the orange arrow is. But for demonstration purposes, we're going to say you're starting a brand new application. You've already updated your organization profile because you're a superstar, and now you're going to open funding opportunities. This is what you'll find. So you'll want to find the Children and Youth Program grants for 2025 and hit apply, and it'll take you to the application page. The first application page is just an overview of everything that we've talked about today, from eligibility criteria through eligible costs. So you can give this a review to familiarize yourself with the details of the program, and then you can hit Begin Application. The first page of the actual application is just for general information. So the first step there is entering the primary contact information. The primary contact is the person that the reviewer of your application will reach out to if we have any questions about the application. So that's whose information you're going to want to use under primary contact. And then we have a couple of basic eligibility questions. So again, confirming that your grant proposal primarily benefits the people of Winnipeg, yes or no, and then consent to share. Consent to share isn't quite an eligibility question because if you tick yes, you're still eligible, and if you tick no, you're still eligible. You just have to answer the question before you can see the rest of the application. And what we're asking in consent to share is, are you okay with us sharing a general overview of your project and of your organization with donors? And so we'll never share personal information about staff or financial information about your organization. We're really just looking to share an overview of your project to see if it's a fit with a donor's philanthropic goals. Once you tick through the eligibility general section, you'll again be presented with a reminder of the overview of the program and its intended goals and eligibility criteria. and then you're into the bulk of the application. And so you'll notice as I click through that this is a horizontal application system. There's multiple tabs going across the top of the application screen. If you try and submit on the first general page, you'll again get a pop-up with a ton of errors telling you that you've missed required fields. And so what's happening there is you've forgotten to click through all of the tabs at the top. So make sure that you're not missing any. Again, once you hit the general application page, the first thing you'll be asked to do is give your project a name. We're not looking for anything brilliant or clever here. Any unique project name under 25 words will do. Then you'll be asked to submit the amount you're requesting, again, up to $25,000, and then provide a brief project summary. And so when I was talking about consent to share with donors, this is the information that we will be pulling. If we share any information about your project with donors, it'll likely come from this field. And so it's really important that in this field, you clearly and concisely describe the main aspects of your project. If it's helpful to you, you can fall back on the classic 5 Ws, the who, what, where, when, and why of your application. If you scroll down, the next thing you'll be asked to do is identify the age of participants and the number of children and youth you expect to serve. It is really helpful if you can provide unique numbers. So how many unique individual youth you will be serving over the course of the project period. Again, though, there's multiple ways to answer this question, and a lot of them are equally valuable. So it's not purely a numbers game. If you serve a large number of unique youth, that's great. It's also really valuable to serve a small number of youth that return to the program daily or are repeat participants, right? We recognize the value in both. We're just looking for a little bit more information. You'll then be asked to provide a start date and end date for your project. Again, there's no minimum or maximum here. Your project might be a single day. It might go over the course of a whole year. Rough estimates here are also fine. And then you'll be asked to describe the community that your project is serving. So again, Children and Youth Program Grants is meant for youth facing systemic barriers to participation. This is the section to describe what kind of barriers your youth are facing and why they're a good fit for this program. Similarly, we have a section here that Neneth mentioned early on inclusion and belonging. And so you're asked to describe how your project will create an environment of inclusion and belonging where participants feel safe to take part regardless of gender, ability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, or socioeconomic background. And so we are looking for specific activities or approaches here. If you have, say, a DEI policy, a safe space framework, DEI training, that's all great information to have. And we'd love to know what that looks like in practice, what you're doing with your youth to ensure that that sense of belonging is cultivated. The next question there is on general project implementation. So these are like the nitty-gritty technicalities of how things are going to work, where you're asked to describe how you'll implement the project, including specific activities, timelines, and where the programming will take place. You will notice that we do often ask for multiple things in one question. And so this is by no means like a creative writing assignment. Any way that you find it easiest to clearly answer each portion is all right with us. So in this case, if you want to make within this narrative box a section for activities, a section for timelines, and a section for where the programming will take place, absolutely, that is okay with us. And then lastly, you're asked to describe the qualifications of staff and volunteers working on this project. And so we're looking for qualifications that are relevant to the project that you are proposing. For example, if you are proposing a program that serves Indigenous and newcomer youth, it's really helpful to know if any of the staff leading or developing the program are themselves from Indigenous and newcomer communities, or if they have experience or training working with Indigenous and newcomer youth. That's where you would highlight that information. The next tab over is budget. Budget will look a little bit different this year than what you might have seen from us in the past. So if you're a returning grantee to the Winnipeg Foundation, you might be familiar with Smart Simple's built-in budget template. We're still working out how to make that template as user-friendly as possible. And so for this year of children and youth program grants, we're reverting to a system where you simply upload a budget, either in Excel, a PDF, a doc, whatever works for you. There are a few things that we are looking for in that budget that we look for every year. And so again, we will be looking for the total amount requested for your proposal. So this is the total budget that is, again, relevant to your specific project, not relevant to your annual operating budget. Then we're looking for a breakdown of that budget by line item, as well as an indication of which line items would be supported by Winnipeg Foundation funds. And so, for example, if your project has, we'll just try and make it simple, has a food component and a staff component, but really you're hoping that the Winnipeg Foundation will only support the food component. It's helpful to have a note of that in your budget of what exactly you're looking for us to fund. So food, not staff. And then lastly, if you have any other funding sources, whether those be confirmed or pending, it's also helpful to include a note of those in your budget. And then there's a note on that page as well, reminding you of what the eligible expense categories are, again, including salaries, professional fees, equipment and supplies, administrative costs, and other program expenses, such as transportation or training. There's a couple ways you could go about this. If you want to create a budget specifically for this application and upload that, by all means, go ahead. Or if you already have a budget that you've prepared, whether that be for another funder or for your own internal use, and you'd like to upload that instead, absolutely, you can do that. And then you can use that additional budget notes narrative section to maybe include any information that we're requesting that's not already in your pre-existing budget that you've created for another purpose. And then the last tab on the application page is not a requirement, but just an opportunity for you to upload any other attachments. So if you have, say, a letter of support or you have organization safety policies and guidelines that you'd like to attach, you can do that here. And that takes us through the full application. I'll go over now a few timelines that are very helpful to note. As I said, applications will open tomorrow, January 15th, and then we will be having a virtual group pre-consult at 12 noon on February 6th. And so if you have any questions that you think of post information session or any questions that are quite specific to your unique circumstances at your organization, the virtual group pre-consult is a great opportunity to ask those. The link that you see on your screen here, the blue text, that'll take you to the registration page for the team's call on February 6th. Applications will then close at 12 noon on February 14th. And please do note that this is a very hard deadline. Smart Simple automatically closes the application at exactly 12 noon. And so if you're even 10 seconds late, your application will be marked as late and we will be unable to review it. And then lastly, you will receive notification of decision in May, early May. So whether or not your application is successful or not, you will hear back from us in early May. Okay, that is the end of my spiel. We'll now move into the Q&A portion of the call. And so please use that chat function again in the top right bar of your screen to submit any questions that you may have. I do ask for simplicity's sake that if you have, again, a question that is quite specific to your unique circumstances, that you save that for either a one-on-one email or call with one of our reviewers, or you come out to the group pre-consult and ask that question there. If you have a question that's generally about the program or about the Winnipeg Foundation that you feel others will also benefit from hearing, perfect, pop that in the chat. And my colleagues, Roxanne and Anna Maria, will relay those to Neneth and I, and we will get you an answer.
Thanks so much, Aaliyah. Just want to make sure you can hear me first.
Yes.
Great. So first question, if an organization has a multi-year grant application pending, can they apply for the Children and Youth Program?
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. It is, I understand, a tricky situation. Yes, if you have a multi-year application pending, please do still apply to children and youth. If your multi-year application is successful, we will simply withdraw your children and youth application as you can't hold both at the same time. If your multi-year application is unsuccessful, we will continue as normal with the review of your children and youth application.
Thank you. Next question, can organizations from rural Manitoba apply for this program?
Depends. So if your organization is in rural Manitoba, but the majority of your participants, the majority of the children and youth that you are serving through this project are coming from Winnipeg, then yes. However, if you are an organization in rural Manitoba and the majority of your participants are also from rural Manitoba, then unfortunately, no, you would not be eligible.
Thank you. The next question is more specific around varying expenses. So can an organization apply for, let's say, costs for field trips and staffing in one application?
Yes. Good point of clarification. Yes, you can apply for multiple areas or multiple different kinds of expenses in one application. What I was talking about earlier is that if there's one particular thing that you're hoping the Winnipeg Foundation will fund, just to make a note of that. But by no means do you have to limit yourself to one thing. That's actually just quite a unique circumstance that's helpful for us to know, but is not a requirement. You can apply for multiple expenses.
Thank you. The next question is in relation to what you talked a little bit about schools. So if a program supported multiple schools, would that be considered eligible?
That might be a question for a one-on-one conversation because I think I might need more details. Um, uh, as a general rule, we encourage school divisions to apply for their whole division. If you have a project that you're working with multiple schools to develop, that might be a one-on-one conversation to get details of what that might look like.
Thank you. Another question around eligible expenses. Can organizations apply for, let's say, either a play structure or technology upgrades?
No, unfortunately, Children and Youth Program grants doesn't cover any major capital costs, which a play structure would count, or a large infrastructure technology development costs would count as major capital. We do, however, have a major capital program, and major capital expenses are eligible under our community grants program. So one of those grants might be a better fit than Children and Youth Program grants.
Perfect. Next question, is the timeline of the grant a maximum of 1 year?
No, so the timeline of the grant is quite open. 1 year is what is typical because folks are looking to reapply the next year, right? So if you would like to create an application where the timeline is more than a year, you are welcome to do so. Just keep in mind that that would make you ineligible to apply again next year, as you would have an ongoing grant and you wouldn't be able to submit a report for an ongoing grant. And therefore, you would have to wait until your current project is closed and reported on before you can reapply.
Thank you. The next question is, if an organization wants to support staff salary, but the youth program is only a part of their duties, should the organization calculate the hours they would spend working on the youth program as part of the budget?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Yes. So because the Children and Youth Program grants is specific to youth programming, all eligible costs have to be related to that youth programming. So if you are looking at staff salaries, as you noted, you would have to calculate the number of hours that they're working on the youth program and apply for those, as only that portion would be an eligible cost.
Thank you. Next question. This might be a question more for Nenit. There was a mention that all applicants must adhere to the Manitoba Human Rights Standards. Where can an organization go to learn more about this?
That is a
Yeah,
good question.
that is a great question. So the Manitoba Human Rights Commission do have a section on how to support organization in regards to all of your practices as an organization. And I know that they are developing some tools for organizations to help them out in that area. Specific for our program, one item that we really look at in terms of the Manitoba Human Rights Code is the hiring practices of an organization, as well as the safety and choice of the participants who are taking part of that program and project. So that's our typically couple of things that we look at when we're assessing those areas.
Thank
Aaliyah,
you,
do you have,
Nenit.
oh, I was just gonna say, Aaliyah, do you have anything else to add about that?
No, that's great. Thank you, Nana.
Okay.
Thank you. Next question is, when considering travel and food related costs, for example, are would food and travel be considered an eligible expense for the adults who are supports for youth with special needs?
Oh, yes. So again, that might be an opportunity to reach out with further details. But if your program is for youth with special needs and they have staff with them that are required to provide that programming, then yes, food and travel for those staff would be eligible. But again, maybe just reach out to us for further clarification.
Thank you. Still have a few questions here in the chat. Next one is, how many grants do you anticipate awarding?
That's a great question. So last year, I believe we had 100 between 150 and 200 applications. And I believe about 50% of those received some form of funding. So it is quite a competitive program. And I will say that the majority of those applications were partial support. So in many cases, the average grant for this program was between, I believe, $10,000 and $15,000.
Thank you. We have one more question in the chat, so I will just sort of make a last call for folks to post any questions in the chat that you would like answered that maybe the larger group could benefit. This one is, would a collaboration between a university and charitable organization qualify?
Great question. I didn't cover collaboration, so thank you for that. Unfortunately, for this program, collaborations are not eligible projects. So in this case, no. Again, our community grants program does support collaborations, so that might be a better fit for you.
That's all we have in the chat over here.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to pop up a slide here with our contact information. So you can reach us both over the phone at 204-944-9474 or at grants WPG FDN. That's short for Winnipeg Foundation, grantswpgfdn.org. Both of those lines will get you to our general team, and then from there we will triage who is the best person to answer your question. Thank you all again for your time. It was lovely to be able to share the details of the program with you. I look forward to reading your applications, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.